Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ramsey, hopefully as a lot of you already know. And today I'm going to be taking care of some unfinished business. So a couple of videos ago, what I did was I looked at the client onboarding OS and basically how you can automate the onboarding process for your business using tools like Codex. In this particular scenario, in this particular series, we are using Codex, but what we did last time was we built the first workflow, right, in NA10 using the Codex agent, where we were taking clients that are marked as closed won in Zoho, right? So that would be whatever clients you have somewhere here. So in your Zoho CRM, I'm just using Zoho 1. That's why it has this interesting thing. I'm going to see if I have them, right? So when they're marked closed won, they become a closed client. And then on top of that, you would then have them submit an intake form, and you can see that in the workflow 2. Sorry, actually that's workflow B, which is what we're going to work on today. Basically where they provide some basic info, like what their primary goal is, their client name, technical contact email, success metric, and so on, right? And then after that, you'd have a workflow B taking over that would build discovery docs, like a simple doc for the client to look at. It would also, notify some system that the CRM intake has been submitted. It would update the tracker. And then it would also have some tasks put in your Zoho projects if you're working with Zoho 1 and probably have access to projects. As you can see, I have Zoho projects here. And as soon as it loads before Christmas, we're going to see what it actually has in terms of projects and the tasks therein. So that's pretty much what we did last time. And essentially, workflow A was answering how a one deal gets provisioned into a project, folders, a docs, a tracker, and CRM state. Workflow B will look at what happens after the client actually submits the onboarding intake and how that intake gets turned into discovery artifacts and project work. So this episode won't be about setup or tooling from scratch. It's going to be a continuation of the real client onboarding build, a walkthrough of workflow B as the intake to discovery layer, and another example of using Codex as an engineering collaborator inside a real NA10 project, right? So what we're going to do here, as we can see Zoho Projects finally opened up, and you can see here we have some discovery stuff. There's like different stages for these projects: the build kickoff, the blueprint, the access and security task list, and the discovery call list, discovery task list that comes up right around there. So workflow B, as you can see, starts with the intake submission. Actually, before we proceed to this, I want you guys to remember that we are pulling all of this from my, or rather the thing we're using is my GitHub. So I'm just gonna open my GitHub. It's the GitHub Codex NA10 Codex starter pack, right? So I'm just gonna sign in there, and it's probably going to ask me for a code on my Authenticator app. So I'm just going to put that up there. This is just regular 2FA, and we're going to hit that, and we are in. So it's this, and I open sourced it, so please feel free to get this. But it's like once you have this, you can easily work with Codex and presumably other agents, because it has an agents.md, a readme.md, and a bunch of docs that you can look at about how to scaffold the NA10 system, and a workflows folder where your Codex agent can pull in stuff using your NA10 API keys. I did a video on this, so look for it somewhere. And so the name is supposed to appear above, and you'll get it and see how I organize this. But just to continue the workflow, we are going to look at, so you can see workflow A was doing the provisioning, mostly like creating the regular folders and stuff. Again, this is a former video where the previous video I was looking at the part 1. And now workflow B is in charge of taking the client submission, where the client is supposed to give a bunch of information. And you can see it run there. Like if you have something like that, it's just going to collect. Of course, right now it's because it's fetching deal content and it's trying to check for a lot of things. Since I'd already done this for a client, it's not going to do anything with that because right now that client is already marked closed won. So if I came here, let me just cross-reference which client it is to test ASME QA 2026. And then, maybe it already found the folder. So I'm just going to come here at that test. And I am going to look for the specific field where I can mark that client as something else. So is it closed won or something else? Let's see if we can find it. Could we test ASME number 2? Let's just look for it. Okay, so it's actually not going to, I just realized, so it's not going to be in accounts, it's going to be in deals. That's where it's going to be, right? So this is where we're marking the deal stage. So closed won. So we could do this as, I think, intake pending or something like that if it's already there. But actually, it's not going to be there. It's going to be down here. So intake submitted, right? So this is what we're going to edit. And you'll see the onboarding stages that the intake has been submitted. So if we say it's one intake pending, right? So this is just to assume the deal was there and like this was the stage it was at. And it's like, what workflow would you run first? You probably run workflow A and just have it like collect. So it's fetching closed won deals. Okay, so yeah, I get it. So it's gonna fetch closed won deals and mark them, right? So the closed one is at the stage here. And we can just check real quick here what the conditions are. You can see that what it's looking at is there a where statement here? Where technical contact email equals order by. Okay, so it is looking for technical contact emails. So do we have a technical contact email here? Let's see. Technical. What is happening? There. So it's supposed to look for those. Right about there, and then it normalizes the deals, and we can see here how it's normalizing. So it's mapping here, and it's looking at the account name, and it's looking at the onboarding stage to see if it's already been provisioned, and then it filters out anything that doesn't have all of these values, automation, blah, blah, because it has the onboarding stage or the onboarding project ID. That's fair enough. So it might not pick that up immediately, but it can pick this up, I think, over here on the workflow B if I then run it. And we can see what it gets from there. As you can see, it is now doing the creation because once a lead is marked as one intake pending, it needs to perform this operation before it marks the lead. Okay, so there's a refresh token required, and that's probably because of my creds. I'm just gonna reconnect right here. Hopefully it hasn't like already updated stuff. So I'm just gonna reconnect and the connection was successful. And then I'm gonna try and run this again. You can sort of see it in action. Okay, so it may have already updated. I'm just gonna reload this. So we go back to workflow B and then run it again, and Hopefully now it should be able to do all the updates as expected. So it updates the tracker row, it does its thing there, does this, and great. And we've created a discovery pack. And now if you go to like Drive and you look at like the intake, so there's some item potency that I have not implemented yet. So it keeps creating new intake snapshots. So that's something we can look into in the future, but you can see it does an intake submission snapshot, whereas the client, the deal submitted at, the business model, all of that info that the client gave in the intake form, right? And then we go here and you can see in the discovery, again, it did two of them. I am just going to delete the other two and look at the one I did last. And you can see it does give an idea about the package, the primary goal, etc., and a bunch of other things. The exact details of the kind of information you collect from the client and the way you organize things in terms of like discovery packs or whether you're doing project management don't actually matter. What matters is that you have some kind of overall system, maybe born out of design from scratch, which I wouldn't advise, or operationalized like knowledge, like you've been doing this and you've got SOPs and workflows and processes, and now you just document them, and then you can sort of get Codex to help you turn that into a system, a sort of like system of like, oh, this is how the data comes in, and this is what we do, and then this is what we do, and so on, and then help you build that, whether with NA10 or anything else. Although in this particular case, we're focusing on NA10, and then you give it access to the different platforms that are necessary for that system to function. So if data is being stored in Notion or Google Drive, it doesn't really matter. There's ways to give it access to all of these things. So in this, I took the simplest example where we're dealing with Google Drive on one hand, NA10 on the other, and Zoho CRM on the third hand, which most people don't have. But you get my point, right? So, and all of this that we're seeing here, because we can see how it does that. There's probably some tasks that were added here. You can kind of like see them, the discovery brief, sign off, etc. These generally get added to the client's view, and you can kind of like get the information about that where you can see here it's pinging my project's API, and it's checking to see what the URLs of the tasks are. And then it goes on and it creates the tasks, right? For the most part, if the tasks already exist, it shouldn't create new ones. So you shouldn't necessarily see any new thing popping up, right? There you go. Priority medium. We have something like that. Is there a priority thing going on here? Priority medium. Yeah, it even has priority levels for all of these things. But that's the general idea, right? And now if we go to the code base, you're going to see that it also has a really cool code base. So I'm just gonna look for it here on my OBS so I can quickly switch that screen, because I learned you can actually switch between screens when you're filming. And that is such a cool thing, right? But anyway, yeah, so that's what we have. That's the code base. As you can see, this is where Codex maintains things. And it has the same structure as everything else, the Codex GPT starter pack. Those are the folders. And under workflows, under active is where it keeps the closed one to kick off provisioning and the intake submitted bit, right? And that's where it maintains these things. It also has like scripts like a pre-push check and a run sync that pushes these to your GitHub, so that it syncs whatever's live in the NA10 with whatever's on your GitHub, and the two remain in sync. And I think this runs on a cron schedule for like once a day or something, right? But that's the general idea. Now, what have we learned? Well, there's quite a few things. So while working with these, and I think it's just a good idea to generally share with you some of the challenges I face and what I did about them, we learned quite a bit here, right? So For starters, you can see that we learned about like how to build workflow B. This is just an Excalibur signal ahead of it, which kind of like mirrors whatever's happening in NA10. So you first fetch the deal context, then you build the discovery context, you find the client folder, and you find the discovery task list. So the client folder will be found in Drive, the discovery task list will be found in Zoho Projects. And then you will find different folders and sheets and update them, and then do a discovery summary. And you will find the discovery task list, and then you will build the tasks and create them in case they're not already there, right? But there's like other lessons. So, for example, um, I learned that. What did I learn? I'm trying to think about some of the challenges I faced, right? So, uh, one is the internal ID exposure. So, like, let's look at this, right? So, it's like if you're doing this and the person has to do that, you kind of have to match them filling this in to their ID in the system. And you'll see if you look at this form, there's a part here probably where I add a client ID. Let's see. Client name, technical contact email, business model, primary goal. Are there any hidden fields that I had? I had the notes section. I had the field name, deadline, sorry, the constraints, the success metric, the systems and scope, the primary goal, business model, technical contact email, and client name. Okay, so I didn't have that here. But like I must have had that somewhere, like where I was normalizing the client intake at the very least. Not there? No. Was it where I was fetching the deal context? Because then you need to, in order to fetch deal context properly, you need to enter the same, you need to enter information. Select ID, deal name, etc., where technical contact email. So in this case, we were looking at the technical contact email that would be put in there. So the technical contact email would actually be what would help us. So one way to do this is that you could have some kind of hidden field in here. Um, and I think there's a way you can like set field visibility. I'm not entirely sure. Is it an option here? Form path, blah, blah, custom form styling, or is it in the actual field? So that's where you reset the value. You can set whether it's required or etc. I think with that, it would be like if there was like a URL. So what you would do ideally is you would have the URL basically have an extra client ID, but then that would expose the client ID to the client when they were like looking at the URL as they opened the form. So I think what we settled at on with Codex was like, let's use a technical contact email to identify the client instead. And that was problem number one that I had to solve. But Codex actually helped me figure that out. Another one was like the summary node would crash, right? So this is the summary node right now. And it would crash because of the way like the different nodes are running. So, it runs the top and then it runs the middle and then it runs the bottom. But this summary node might need information that hasn't run yet. So it would crash basically when upstream branch nodes had not executed. So what we would do is we would first do guarded lookups. So you should be able to see that somewhere here. So node items, and then we would catch errors and return an empty array. Same thing here. And then it would build the summary from that, right? So that's another thing. There was also like when we would have OAuth scope issues. We actually experienced one of that right now. So actually, this wasn't an OAuth scope issue when my refresh token expired. It was just the OAuth issue. I need to set that refresh token so it doesn't expire. But also scope, because finding discovery task lists and creating discovery task lists requires certain scopes in Zoho projects. And this is something that Codex can really help you figure out. Like, it can tell you what kind of scope you need. So you give the scope when you are actually setting up the API key. And you can do that in the API console in Zoho. I won't go into that right now, but let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that in the future. Another one was like sometimes it have duplicate discovery structures, and this was the discovery task list. I think that's where I fixed duplicates first, but I haven't yet fixed them within the folders. But like having some kind of item potency around discovery task lists. And so again, Codex helped me fix that. And then there would be, like things like template naming mismatches. Basically, if the template is called, and this is mostly about Zoho projects. So the template in this case would probably be under my projects. So if I went to projects or home or whatever, projects, and then I look for templates, specifically, you would have to, because we were building all of these from templates, you would have to look for the specific template that you wanted, and you have to make sure you get the name right in the API. So that's another gotcha that we figured out. I think it's the starter audit. I'm not sure. That's a template. This is an example of a template right here. But yeah, so right now we wouldn't see here. These are my project templates. There we go. So you can see we have like different templates. So you'd have to get the exact name of the template right, and so on and so forth. But generally, what I would say at this point is that workflow B, we had onboarding structurally existing. We had the discovery work not informed or assigned. But now what we have is that the intake gets captured, the information that you get from the client. We have intake docs existing in Drive. We have discovery packs in the projects. The CRM state also advances. As you can see here, every time we run that, the CRM state also advances. So it goes from one intake pending to intake submitted. So I'm just gonna reload that page and we will see it pop up right here. Where is it? Intake submitted, just because I ran this. So we are seeing state tracking happening in Zoho CRM. We're also seeing that the tracker reflects the intake milestone. So we also have a tracker for all of our clients. So if you go here and we have the client stuff, we can see that there's a tracker here, which is just like a simple Google sheet. And the onboarding tracker keeps making sure that we know what happened and when, on which date, and so on. And that's really great. So what's next? What are we going to build next in this series? Well, we're going to go to workflow C. So if I look at this, this is mostly the workflow B context that we're seeing with the client form and the information that's taken. But workflow C is now going to do access reminders and escalation. So you managed to close the deal. You sent the client a form that they're supposed to provide you relevant information with. What if they don't do it on time? Well, you need to remind them. You need to escalate. You need to have some kind of internal process. And that's what workflow C is going to do. Then we'll have workflow D, which is about provisioning the blueprint and the whole process for how you deliver it, and then maybe operation summaries and alerts. So next time, hopefully soon, because I've got like a lot of different topics, a lot of different episodes that I'm trying to do a storm of videos on, I'm going to go to Workflow C, and we're going to continue this journey with Codex. I'm also thinking of having like a thing where instead of like building it beforehand and then showing it to you guys, we sit down and we just pick up on the Codex chat where we left off with the repo, and then we have Codex build it for us in real time. So if you would like to see something like that, let me know in the comments below. And this is just something I'm thinking of doing. Maybe even doing streams where we just build something with Codex or Cloud Code or whatever and see where it goes. Otherwise, I hope this has been informative about some of the ways you can use Codex. I have not shown Codex in the screen. I showed it in the last video, but just know that it was behind the scenes. What mostly matters is a repo structure, because with Codex, it's just mostly chatting, getting it to do actions, which I can show in like a live stream or like a build with me kind of episode. But I have shown you the repo structure and what's happening behind the scenes on the relevant platforms. So until next time, ciao, Bella. Bye-bye.